Welcome to Chapter 3 of the course. This is about background issues in language learning. The focus of this unit is about the miracle of language, the importance of repetition, thinking about the language, arousal, affects, humanistic teaching, when you are ready, and language play. However, the main focus of this unit is about the miracle of language, language acquisition and language learning, and the last one is about learning theories. Now let's begin with the first part of this lesson, the miracle of language. Now the first question that we need to take into consideration is that are we born with an innate capability to learn languages? Okay, let's begin with the time that we were children. Now let's consider how the children acquire language. As far as we can see, children are not taught language, nor do they set out to learn language consciously. Rather, they acquire it subconsciously as a result of the massive exposure to the language which they get from the adults or other children around them. Actually, many children around the world acquire more than one language, and by the age of 6 or 7, they are speaking as confident bi or trilinguals. Their instinct or the mental capability we are born with acts upon the language they hear and transforms it into the knowledge of the language and an ability to speak it. It's that simple. Or rather, it isn't quite that simple. So we can say that children have powerful incentive to communicate effectively. Even at the pre-word phase of their development, they have an instinct to let people know when they are happy or miserable or hungry or alarmed. Also, the children have exposed to special kind of language by the adults around them, like exaggerated intonation or higher pitch or shorter sentences or simplified language. If you asked most people exactly how they speak to children, they would not be able to say on what basis they choose the words or grammar. So we can say that it is usually done subconsciously. In other words, that instinctual ability to absorb language and context and to transform them into an ability to understand and speak perfectly doesn't usually last forever. However, at around the time of puberty, children start to develop an ability for abstraction, which makes them better learners, but may also make them less able to respond to language on a purely instinctive level. So despite the fact that there is some special and unique about first language acquisition, a concern of many theorists and methodologists is to see how we can replicate the success of that kind of language acquisition in the language learning classroom. The question is, can the success in first language acquisition be replicated in language learning classrooms or second language acquisition? So in this lesson, we will look at a number of theories, both historical and current, that have been advanced and which methodologists have used to help them decide what methods and techniques to expose. Now let's begin with the main part of this lesson, language acquisition and language learning. Let's take a look at the following photos. All knowledge is assumed to be directly transferable from experts to students. So if you take a look at the photos below, you will see that teachers may keep different roles in the classroom. For example, they may be controller and resource. However, in the following photo, can you identify the roles of the teachers? Yes, the teacher here plays the role of a prompter, the provider of comprehensible input, and also a participant. In the next photo, The teacher here is a tutor or the supporter for the students. Some people pick up second languages without going to lessons. Others go into language classes and study the language they wish to learn. Of the two situations, picking up a language is closer to first language acquisition than studying a language in the classroom is. This fact was recognized long ago by Harold Palmer in his book The Principles of Language Study in 1905. In this book, Palmer showed his interest in the difference between spontaneous and studial capabilities. The former described the ability to acquire language naturally and subconsciously, whereas the latter allowed the students to organize their learning and apply their conscious language to the task in hand. So Palmer suggested that spontaneous capabilities are brought into play for the acquisition of the spoken language. In the meantime, studial capabilities are required for the development of literacy. After Palmer, we have the acquisition learning hypothesis by Stephen Krashen in 1984. Firstly, we make a difference between acquisition and learning. Acquisition is subconscious, while learning is conscious. Acquisition is easily used in spontaneous conversation, while learning is taught and studied as grammar and vocabulary. Now, acquisition is instantly available, while learning helps us to monitor our spontaneous conversation. So the monitor hypothesis was created. Krashen saw the successful acquisition by students of a second language as being bound up with the nature of the language input they received. It had to be comprehensible, even if it was slightly above their productive level. He called this comprehensible input I+1. That is information the students already have plus the next level up. And the students had to be exposed to it in a relaxed setting. This input is roughly tuned. Rather, as parent enjoined, language is subconsciously moderated as we saw above, and is in stark contrast to the finely tuned input of much language instruction, where specific graded language has been chosen for conscious learning. Roughly tuned input as acquisition, whereas finely tuned input combined with conscious learning does not. Let's take a closer look to acquisition and language learning. We may say that language acquisition is the process in which language is absorbed naturally and subconsciously, while language learning is the process in which students organize their learning and apply their conscious knowledge to the task in hand. Now let's take a look at the characteristics of language acquisition and language learning. These were suggested by Harold Palmer and Stephen Krashen. So the implications for this is that the teachers should expose students to large amounts of comprehensible input in a relaxed setting and might have students learn language consciously at some later stage.